Today, I want to complete a series of videos I began shortly after the Blue Origin pad explosion. In the first, I argued that Starship should be restricted to cargo-only missions for the time being. I explained why NASA's current vendor-driven architecture, an integrated lander that uses a single vehicle for descent, surface operations and ascent, concentrates too much risk in one spacecraft. In my view, this is a fundamentally unsafe approach for crewed missions, regardless of which vehicle is used. NASA's own Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel has raised similar concerns for several years now. My criticism applies only to crewed missions. I have no issue with cargo missions using either Blue Origin's or SpaceX's lunar landers. Concentrating risk into a single vehicle with no redundancy or backup is a fragile architecture. Missions only work when everything goes to plan, with many off-nominal scenarios leading to loss of crew, which makes integrated landers the worst architecture for crew survivability. Compounding the problem is the multiple immature technologies and the intense schedule pressure exerted on these companies, which could easily lead to bad outcomes. This is a classic recipe for what the space industry calls go fever. The organizational pressure to press ahead with a launch or mission, even when safety or technical risks exist. Both the Challenger and Columbia reports noted that schedule pressure contributed to those disasters. NASA is clearly in a rush to develop and deliver crewed vehicles for moon landings, to meet the political deadline of landing astronauts on the moon in 2028. The problem with rushing. Let me be clear up front. There is no way to land crew safely on the moon in 2028. Both SpaceX and Blue Origin are developing vehicles that rely on complex engine cycles, cryogenic propellant management, and extremely complicated operations, all while concentrating risk into a single vehicle. These systems have little to no redundancy or backup. For the crew to survive, almost every major system must work perfectly. It's possible a landing could take place in 2028. It may even succeed. But that's not because a safe and reliable system was developed. It was because NASA got lucky. We are facing 2 years of intense schedule pressure that could easily lead to overriding safety concerns in order to launch and show progress. We saw this clearly in 1986 when the Challenger space shuttle exploded. The technical failure was the O-rings performing poorly in cold temperatures, but the underlying cause was the desire to maintain a steady flight rate to justify the program, despite known risks. We saw it again in 2003, when Columbia disintegrated during re-entry. The foam strike on ascent had been observed, but it was dismissed as a manageable issue. This was a clear case of the normalization of deviance, accepting risks that would have been considered unacceptable earlier in the program. Today's situation carries many of the same warning signs, and in some respects it is even more concerning. Let's look at the classic indicators of go fever and see how many are already present as NASA tries to force a crewed lunar landing in just 2 years. Strong external pressure from the President and Congress to meet the 2028 deadline. Multiple immature technologies still in development, including cryogenic propellant transfer and complex engine cycles. Downplaying of serious problems, the Starliner problems for example. Over-reliance on contractor self-assurance, as noted by the ASAP report. Fixed-price contract on immature technologies, a new risk that adds internal commercial pressure to protect profit margins. Reluctance to accept schedule slips. The pressure to land on the moon in 2028 is huge. And pressure to demonstrate visible progress, both to Congress and NASA. The one classic warning sign we have not yet seen in full force is the normalization of deviance, where serious problems become accepted as just the way things are. With the current level of schedule pressure, that risk is now very real. NASA's message to vendors. Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator, has accepted the political goal of landing on the moon in 2028. He now plans for 2 lunar landings that year, Artemis 4 and Artemis 5, following a risk reduction mission, Artemis 3, in low Earth orbit next year. He has told SpaceX and Blue Origin to accelerate their schedule to meet deadlines with margin. He has stated that NASA will not keep funding underperforming programs. In addition, he says that actual mission outcomes are what's important, not protecting specific contractors or legacy hardware. All of these statements pile pressure on vendors to deliver, and quickly. While it's understandable given the political pressure he is under, there is simply no safe way to land crew on the moon in just 2 years. Much of the technology required remains immature. Large-scale cryogenic propellant transfer has never been demonstrated in orbit. Neither has the ability to store and manage around 1,000 tons of propellant at the correct temperatures for days or even weeks. On top of that, the concept of operations is extremely complex, potentially requiring up to 16 launches, multiple dockings, and extensive propellant transfers to support a single crewed mission. Then there is life support, landing stability, and a host of other critical systems that have yet to be proven at this scale. As NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel put it, the task is, and I'm quoting here, daunting and probably not achievable. Rushing to meet a political deadline risks repeating the mistakes of the shuttle era. Unfortunately, that appears to be exactly where we are heading. But is there a better way? Well, yes there is. Let's look at that approach now. A better phased approach. NASA outlined a 3-phase approach to building a moon base during its ignition event in March 2026. We can use that framework as a starting point, but with some important adjustments. The goal is to deliver a safe and reliable crew transportation system during phases 1 and 2, while giving the HLS providers the opportunity to demonstrate safe and reliable cargo operations before moving to crewed missions in phase 3. Around 90% of the missions required to build and sustain a moon base are cargo missions. A large amount of equipment, rovers, power systems, communications infrastructure, and scientific instruments will need to be delivered in the early phases of the Artemis program. Considerable lunar infrastructure is needed, including site preparation, roads, and landing pads, to facilitate the quick and efficient logistics to support a permanent moon base. The HLS providers can use the first 2 phases to mature their vehicles through repeated cargo deliveries, while the necessary lunar infrastructure is put in place. Then, in phase 3, once they have proven reliable cargo operations, they could begin landing large crewed vehicles on prepared landing pads, with hazards cleared, proper lighting, and navigation aids, giving them the safest possible conditions for crewed landings. Let's look at each phase in more detail. Phase 1. Build the foundation, cargo heavy. In Phase 1, Cargo Starship and Blue Origin's Mark II lander deliver heavy payloads to the lunar surface. NASA will land lunar terrain vehicles to survey and explore potential sites for a future Artemis moon base, scientific payloads and initial power systems to support a lunar power grid will also be deployed. This phase should also include initial deployment of the Safe Haven network. Each heavy cargo lander mission includes 1 ascent and Safe Haven vehicle. Over time, all key locations in the lunar South Pole will have redundant return to orbit capability and Safe Haven shelters. With a descent vehicle developed and 2 or 3 ascent vehicles already pre-positioned, along with LTVs stationed nearby, initial crewed landings could take place. In addition, a dedicated crew rescue vehicle would be stationed in low lunar orbit to provide an evacuation option for astronauts stranded in space. Add missing class of vehicle, heavy logistics mover. To deploy the lunar Safe Haven network more rapidly and to move heavy payloads across the lunar surface, a missing class of vehicle will be needed, the heavy logistics mover. This is a dedicated rover chassis capable of transporting 5-ton payloads from the landing site to their final destination. Because of the moon's low traction, the vehicle would move very slowly, around 1 to 2 kilometers per day. However, if it begins moving at the start of the lunar day, it could still cover 14 to 28 kilometers before nightfall, which is more than enough distance for most practical purposes. With this type of vehicle, a single heavy cargo lander mission could deploy 4 or more Safe Haven stacks, significantly speeding up the build-out of the safe haven network across the lunar South Pole. Phase 2. Expand infrastructure and capability. In Phase 2, the steady use of heavy cargo landers continues to mature the complex technologies and operations required for lunar missions. Any failed landings during this phase are used to identify and mitigate risks, gradually leading to more reliable flights. A lunar power grid is established, and the safe haven network is connected to it. This provides 24/7 shelters for astronauts operating on the surface. The network expands from the connecting ridge, the most likely location for the Artemis base camp, out to Shackleton Crater and beyond. This allows scientific missions and expeditions to operate further from the main base with the confidence that nearby shelters are available. The multi-purpose habitat and pressurized lunar cruiser are deployed, providing the first non-lander habitation spaces on the Moon. Additional LTVs are delivered to support infrastructure work, site preparation, surveying, and to provide improved mobility options to astronauts. Frequent descent vehicle landings continue, with missions now able to extend even through the lunar night, thanks to the established power grid. The first crew-configured HLS landers also begin operating. These vehicles carry the full set of systems, including life support, but fly without crew. These missions build confidence that crewed operations can begin once the supporting lunar infrastructure is complete and the vehicles have been human-rated. Phase 3. Human-rated operations when ready. By Phase 3, dedicated lunar landing pads have been completed, providing large, flat, and well-prepared surfaces for HLS vehicles. With lighting and navigation beacons in place, human-rated HLS landers can begin making their first crewed landings. If these vehicles are not ready yet, the descent vehicles continue to be used for crewed missions. Even when HLS vehicles are routinely used, the descent vehicles will continue to serve as dedicated lone lunar orbit rescue vehicles and for landing on unprepared regions which lack lunar support infrastructure needed for HLS vehicles. This approach gives SpaceX and Blue Origin the opportunity to demonstrate safe and reliable cargo and crew transport without making the entire program dependent on them. Both the descent and ascent vehicles have dual roles. The descent vehicle also functions as a low lunar orbit rescue asset and provides access to frontier or high-risk terrain unsuitable for large crewed landers. The ascent vehicles contribute to the safe haven network and offer emergency return to orbit capability for both long and short-stay astronauts. Large HLS crew transports complement the descent and ascent vehicles rather than replacing them. We now have a complete plan. Make full use of the HLS providers for heavy cargo missions to build out the moon base and gain flight heritage, while using the descent and ascent vehicles in the early phases to begin crewed missions safely. In later phases, the main base can receive crew transport missions using HLS vehicles, while frontier areas continue to be visited using rugged descent vehicles designed to keep the crew alive no matter how difficult the landing. Why this is better? This plan delivers the redundancy and backup options that NASA's safety panels have been calling for. It allows the HLS providers to fly and mature their vehicles through cargo missions without putting crew at risk. At the same time, it enables a rapid build-out of the Artemis base camp and its supporting infrastructure. By Phase 3, with landing pads and power grids in place, HLS vehicles that have already demonstrated safe and reliable cargo operations and have received human rating can begin crewed missions to the main base. Descent vehicles continue to operate in parallel, landing in frontier locations and scouting new areas for future outposts and bases. This plan provides a robust safe haven and lunar rescue capability, supports human exploration and the maturing of heavy landers and crewed transport. With proper lunar infrastructure in place, large crewed vehicles can land on safe, hazard-free, and well-prepared surfaces, ensuring more reliable missions. All of NASA's long-term goals for the Moon are fully supported, with large crewed missions possible by mid to late 2030s. Smaller crewed missions using more rugged vehicles are possible in the early 2030s if development proceeds quickly. Final thoughts. The choice is between rushed development of highly complex vehicles with many failure modes, or simpler, dedicated ascent and descent vehicles that use highly reliable propulsion and robust crew protection systems. Any failed crew landing that results in loss of life could set the space program back a decade or more. New landers would then have to be developed, this time with a clear safety focus. Wouldn't it make more sense to design with that safety focus from the beginning? Trying to meet an arbitrary deadline of 2028 to beat the Chinese, when America beat the competition to the moon in 1969, makes no sense. Far from beating them, it risks imploding the whole space program and allowing China to race ahead, unchecked. What do you think? Should we methodically build up capability with cargo vehicles first? Or is beating the Chinese back to the moon the most important goal? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this space video, consider buying me a coffee to help fund more episodes like this. The link is in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe so you'll see our upcoming videos. We make videos every week covering the space industry with an emphasis on the smaller space startups that aren't covered so well on other channels. See you soon.